So this video is going to be dedicated to, well, some people call it a theory, but at the same time though, after kind of laying eyes on this, I'm going to give you every reason to believe in a rational sense, like meaning facts, that we humans really might not be looking at life the way we should have been. And really, when you really look at how big the universe is, you know, you can kind of understand it to be like it's not what we think it is. It's bigger. Think of it like this, okay? Because this is going to get really confusing, but I'm going to do the best I can to explain this. Okay, so there was a quote that I came out with not too long ago where I stated, because to help me prepare for this, just so I can memorize this. It's essentially like, you know, the more we learn about the universe, like the bigger we can imagine the universe, even though it's infinite. But like, just to kind of give you some examples, like when we see how many galaxies there are, how big the observable universe is, like just for an example, you really start to question like everything you know, and you really start to come to this realization that everything is really wrong. You know, at least the sense. Like for example, you know, go back millions of years ago, or thousands, or hundreds of thousands of years ago. People used to think that the Earth was flat. Then we proved that wrong. People used to think that the Earth doesn't move, but then we proved that wrong. People used to think the sun was stationary. I'll be honest, when I got out of high school, I didn't even know this until recently. But, you know, all stars move. Because I was thinking to myself, well, wait a minute, you know, if you have a galaxy that makes up, you know, this is why I pretty much started teaching myself things, because you know, you just don't learn these things from other people unless, of course, the people that are telling you actually have a good point to make. You know, for example, if you have a galaxy that's moving in space and time, and the stuff that's in that galaxy is stars and stardust and all these other solar systems. Mind you, a star is a solar system. It's just the center of gravity, and there's like binaries, and meaning like there's more than one star orbiting another star, or to get a little bit more complicated, there could be multiple stars that are orbiting each other, but they orbit to the point where they're all the center of gravity at some point. So it's like a solar system orbiting a solar system, and maybe there's even some stars that even collide with each other and become a bigger star, or however that works. But essentially the idea is to explain that, you know, humans don't know everything until we really start learning these things. Because if stars didn't move, it'd be like, well, wait a minute, the galaxy itself just moves, but the stars stay where it's at. I mean, so all the stars themselves have to move, and they do. As a matter of fact, I think the sun is moving faster than the Earth is accelerating, something like that. But whatever the case is, you know, when you look up at the sky and you look at, you think you see nothing out there, but really what's really interesting is there's so many stars out there, even stars you can't even see in just the galaxy itself, but like so many things that are beyond this solar system, and yet, wow, man, how many things we don't even know. Makes you wonder, like, really how big it really is. But at the same time, though, if you have a bunch of scientists that at least believe that, you know, everything's infinite and there's like an infinite number of dimensions, you know, you can essentially say that, well, Earth obviously wasn't created first, you know, it had to have been, and again, demanding that all the religions are wrong and that everybody, what people believe is just really a prank and a hoax, essentially. Because when you really think about it, you know, the truth is out there, not really on this planet. Like, I mean, okay, we can figure things out on this planet, but really, we're really trying to figure out like where we came from. Essentially, we have to look further into the universe, and the proof, the definitive proof I want to start with here, that humans aren't necessarily 100% from Earth, is that we are made up of stardust. Okay, so the Earth was created like every other planet was, but in a sense that we are created in the way that, you know, like planetary evolution. Like, for example, like there's like different types of evolution, and there's different types of, everything is made of energy. Okay, so like for example, when everything dies, for example, it returns back to the Earth or whatever planet it belongs to, and then there's like an infinite cycle that loops over and over and over again. And because of this, you know, like the law of conservation states that everything cannot be destroyed. It can only be multiplied, essentially. Because, again, you know, if you have like all this energy and change it from a physical or a chemical change, if you want to go by that matter, it has to go somewhere. But, you know, when you think about it, the universe existed, or maybe there was whatever universe the Earth belongs to, let's just say, far longer before the Earth itself came. So here was the universe, and then inside of it was the Earth. Well, the galaxy, the Milky Way, and then our sun, our solar system, and then our Earth. But my point I'm trying to get at with this is that, so if we were just flying around in the universe somewhere before our evolution came and turned us into what we were, well, then essentially you could say that our DNA is, well, this is where it gets really confusing, because there's actually a lot of scientists that are now starting to really understand how long strands of DNA, bacteria, can actually live, and they can actually live longer than you might think they can. So, like, you might die, but then your DNA strands return back to the Earth, and eventually maybe they could just give it some time, and eventually it can form into something else. And so, essentially, your DNA could essentially be somebody else's DNA. And again, it gets really confusing. Like, all these infinite possibilities that these scientists just come up with, and, well, I didn't conclude, rather, but there's enough evidence to back it up that you are still your own individual person, but at the same time, though, like, you could have a race go extinct, like a species, and maybe their genetics still exist somewhere, and it eventually changes into something else over time. So it's like reincarnation, sort of, like, is real, but at the same time not like the way we look at it, though, if that makes sense. And whether there's an afterlife, like, that's subjectable, that's still debatable, no one really knows for sure. But the way I look at it, I actually, from an agnostic's point of view, I would like to assume there's one, because I don't like to leave any stone unturned, but I can tell you for a fact it's not going to be what we, at least from a human's perspective, it's not going to be what we think it is. Would it surprise me? Not really. But at the same time, it kind of would. Like, why it wouldn't surprise me is because there's so many things we don't know, so therefore, like, there's so many other places we haven't checked yet, and so maybe we've just been looking in the wrong locations. But, maybe not. Maybe there's just an infinite number of planets out there, and there really is no meaning behind all of it. As ironic as that seems. Put it this way, even though this is kind of, sort of off topic, but at the same time it's not, if there really is a God, I would say, or deity, like supernatural entity, I would actually be more, I would be more curious if there wasn't one. Like, if somehow, like, there wasn't one that created all this, somehow, like, what would it be like versus what we think it is? Okay, so my camera went dead, but I'm just going to resume the video in my garage. But anyways, okay, so my point is this, alright? If you were to take into consideration that there was some sort of creator that created this universe, or just existence of any kind, then essentially what you're saying is that you agree with the understanding that maybe there would be something else out there. But then, but like, take the atheist community, for example. They would say that, okay, well, then where did this God come from, and then this God, and, when you really put it on paper, you just get more questions than you do answers, because, again, there's so many things we don't know, and no matter how smart you are, like, you could be someone like Stephen Hawking, for example, where, like, the guy is well known for being a genius, and he is, or someone like Carl Sagan when he was still alive, and yet nobody knows everything. There's always going to be things out there we don't know. But again, not to get confused with, like, the God of the Camps theory, where, like, for example, you need God to fill in, like, all the blanks. Again, when I say, like, deities, I mean, like, just anything, like, even deities that we've never even heard of. If such a being does in fact exist, then it wouldn't surprise me in some aspects. But if the universe kind of has, like, let's say there's no deities, and we're just, like, digging around trying to find, like, what the hell created this entire universe, or even maybe the universe has just been like this. Well, then that would be even more confusing, because it'd be like, well, how did this all start then? Could it have just been the way it was? Maybe there was no cause. It's weird. You know what I mean? It's like we try to rationalize everything, but there's just some things that we just can't answer. And either way, this is one of those kind of questions where, like, you can't really answer it. What definitively, like, for example, like, going back to the whole argument, like, about atheism and, people that believe in theism. And the whole reason I'm an agnostic, the reason why I bring this point up is because it's very relevant to this situation. If you start questioning like everything you've been told, and you start questioning like your whole origins, you really start to ask yourself, what really happened here? Sorry, I'm just a bit cold right now. Michigan weather is not necessarily 100%, warm and fuzzy. It's really cold, like fridges, like not that much snow outside, but it's enough to make me freeze. But anyways, my point is, and if you don't believe me, like not as far as weather goes, but like, take like a clear sky, because I'm looking at the sky right now. I could probably see like 10 stars right now that I can probably count off the top of my head. I don't know which ones they are, but but think of it like this. Like with every star that's out there, though, that's a whole other solar system, meaning like there could be other planets that orbit that star, most likely. And, if you think about it, I mean, even take our solar system. There's definitely way more than 9 planets. I think last time I checked there was like 1,800 planets or something like that are said to exist, but they're farther past Pluto. If you're trying to think about what I'm trying to say, take our moon, for example. If you can believe that DNA came from outer space and that DNA lives on and it just returns back to the universe, and you can believe that, everything evolved somehow, like planets evolve, and I mean like everything, energy, like the universe is energy. Everything is made of energy. You and I are made of energy. This video is made of energy. Sort of. But my point is, if you think about it though, if everything is made of energy, then that means that everything, moves around. Everything evolves. Everything evolves. So if you can believe that the universe could possibly have our own existence, could have came from another planet. And this doesn't really seem too far-fetched because, like take our moon, for example, when it crashed into Earth back in billions of years ago, there was a planet known as Thera. It was speculated to be in our solar system, or maybe it came from somewhere else. I don't know. It was what was known as it had no orbit. So like essentially, if you think of it like shot put, or something like that, where like like in the Olympics, like when they spin around and they throw a heavy ball and they measure how far they can throw it, shot put or something like that, or something like that. Essentially, it's like the same thing. Like planets orbit in circles, but then there's some planets out there that they don't necessarily orbit the same way, and it's kind of scary because, like for example, like you think of it like everything is being held by some sort of gravity, but like as soon as that gravity breaks, now that object is going to go hurling into a dark abyss, aka the universe, also known as the universe, and it's just going to keep going until it hits something. And when you think about it, there's planets out there that do that. There's like, so planet Thera was actually I believe it came from the asteroid belt, the one that was between Mars and Jupiter, and it's possible Jupiter could have forced it out of its atmosphere because Jupiter's got like this very weird like reverse gravity, anti-gravity. So anyways, so the idea could be like maybe our DNA came from Thera. Maybe there was life on Thera. And when it imploded with our Earth, obviously killing everything on Thera, but at the same time though, maybe there were things that survived. And our DNA came from space. And if that's too far-fetched, like if it didn't come from Thera, then maybe our DNA could have came from outer space. Again, like there are winds in space, solar winds. There could also be, asteroids could have just collided with our planet and we came from a faraway planet that was, like take asteroids, for example. Genetics, that makes perfect sense when you think about it. Asteroids are, well, not only that, but planets are like giant rocks, but just with an atmosphere. Unless, of course, their atmosphere gets destroyed like Mercury's did, then essentially what happens is, it's just a big giant rock core. Even like big gas planets like Jupiter, maybe at one point it had a core, maybe it does have a solid core, but the problem is though it's just mostly gas though, and it's too thick to measure it. But, somewhere on that planet's surface, there could be what is known as acidophilies or extremophilies. I'll give you another example. Look at the planet Venus, for example. There's a lot of scientists that have stated that, over the years that Venus is the planet is very similar to that of Earth. That is Earth's sister. But if you study Jupiter, or not Jupiter, if you study Venus nowadays, it's anything but that. Like, the thing that really got me about the history of Venus is that before, a long time ago, it used to be just, like, it could have had water on it, could have had cannons, not like cannons, like, you know, like fire cannons, like where you fire stuff at a war, but like cannons, like the Grand Canyon and all that, stuff like, you know, stuff like that, like these rocky plains and all that, and valleys, and they seep and all that. There could have been prehistoric life on that planet, you know, but it obviously, you know, dried itself up because of 864 degrees Fahrenheit. Last time I checked, I think the current temperature right now, like I'm shivering in right now, is 20 degrees right now, Fahrenheit. Doesn't really sound too cold in comparison, but believe me, I mean, to some degree, I'm not really used to it 100%, especially when you're standing next to a wood stove that's probably like 400 degrees Fahrenheit, but it heats the house up to like maybe almost 80 degrees. It's just how I get past the winter. But, you know, but I'm used to spring, summer, and fall. But my point is, though, when you think about how big the universe is, though, there's so much we don't know. And yet, it seems like there's an infinite number of ways. So it's like you could take the number infinity, multiply it by, or yeah, you could essentially have infinity to the infinite power, and it's just like, that's just how the universe can be summed up in one sentence. It just goes on and on and on, because as long as it's expanding, you know, and let's take life on other planets, for example. You know, let's say that there was another planet that had life on it, and then it went extinct, or maybe that there's still like current life out there somewhere, and then maybe like the same thing happens, but in their own way. Or like, for example, like, you know, maybe there was like DNA or whatever their physical genetic makeup is, and then all of a sudden it goes to another planet, and then it evolves. You know, I mean, I can understand the concept if there is a creator. But I'm just saying that I just don't believe in the ones that people worship. And I don't think any human being that, again, not insulting people, but realistically, when you think about it, it just seems like humans are wrong about everything. Unless, of course, they're right about something. And that's just how that works. But humans, like, the way I look at it, you know, humans came from space. And up until this point, if you can really think about all the things that I'm telling you so far, and hell, even other things that I probably could mention that I'm drawing a blank right now, and all the things I probably don't even know. There's more than one way of looking at this, and when you really dig into it, it doesn't really seem too far-fetched that maybe humans really didn't come from Earth, because, you know, you look at our history, it might go back, but, you know, we evolved. We came from space. Earth wasn't here since the beginning of time. It created just like all these other planets from the same material that we evolved from, but just differently, though. See, the better question I think that people should be asking themselves, rather than just, you know, arguing about religion, is really looking at, you know, our own origins. Like, being honest with ourselves. You know, I think the best way to approach this question, like, where did we really come from, is to really try and figure out as far back as we can, you know, what we evolved from. Because, again, when you really think about it, there is, you know, going back to like to the acidophilies, for example, that live on Venus. I mean, there is bacteria. For the people that don't believe in life on other planets, well, you'd be surprised. Because if evolution is real and everything came from genetics, well, okay, they've discovered that hell, even the universe, that's like negative 512 degrees Fahrenheit, or was it 478 degrees Fahrenheit negative? I can't remember off the top of my head. It's like almost sub-zero, like absolute zero, which isn't 0 degrees. It's like my chemistry teacher would always say. He's like, I'll give you a hint. It's not 0 degrees. It was negative 478 degrees Fahrenheit or something like that. And it's cold. My point is this. You know, if you can look at how big the universe is, and if you can understand that there are things out there that we don't know, then the concept is, and there's definitely things that came before our time, you can definitely say that maybe humans really did come from somewhere else, because we didn't just go to Earth and that was it. No, I mean, like, we probably traveled with the universe, because there's so many things out there that we don't really see too often. Like, for example, other planets. But all the planets came from the same location, sort of. You know, there's just a lot of other things that happened before this planet was created. Like, for example, you would have like all these different nebulas and all these different, like again, like take stars for example. When you really look at like the star cycle, for example, humans don't, like when you really understand like how the universe works, like genetic makeup, everything is made of DNA, everything is made of energy. That energy could evolve into something else, and again, there's like steps too. Everything eventually branches off differently, and you get all these different results. Like for example, everybody on this planet could technically be what is called a human being, but everybody looks differently because at some point everybody evolved differently. But if you really think about it, if we really came from like another location somewhere in the universe, there were so many places that existed far before Earth. And seeing how, all this material keeps just repeating itself. Like, so for example, you could have a star that is born and then eventually dies many years later. And then all that material returns back to the Earth, but there's even more of it now. And we're talking about like star nebulas, like stardust, everything, man. It's like eventually that material just turns into something else, and it just keeps going on and on and on. And, again, everything is infinite. It makes sense. Not to mention if you don't believe, here's another way of looking at it. One of the other major points I want to make, because everything's infinite, like take a physical object. Look at that object. Try and figure out what everything that thing's made of. And then try and figure out what that's made of. And then that's made of. You know what I mean? It goes on and on and on. But my point is, though, humans, when you really think about all these things I'm saying, well, humans didn't really come from Earth. I mean, we might have been here since the beginning of time. I mean, I'm not saying like aliens deployed us here. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that, from a realistic perspective, when you look at before the Earth is born, before you understand, like, we came from space because that's just what, that's the material we evolved from. But how did the material that we evolved from came here? It traveled through space. Now, I mean, maybe not through a spaceship, but through through a rock, another rock, and another rock, and another planet, and another, you know what I mean? Like, it's evolution. It's thanks to evolution we're here. It's thanks to evolution that life exists the way it does. I mean, I'm not saying that there isn't a deity out there, but it's just, that would be something that nobody can really prove right now. Like, or maybe they could prove that a deity exists, but they just couldn't prove that which one does in fact exist. So what I'm trying to say is this. When we really look at the origins of life and try to get an accurate answer for everything we really can't just answer in this day and age, you really just got to ask these questions. Where did we really come from? And when you really think about it, when somebody can just flat out tell you that the Earth wasn't always here, and that the moon wasn't always here, and that there were other places, like other planets, or other galaxies, or other universes, and then what's beyond that? When you really think about it, you'll start digging into like all these other objects that existed far before we did. Stars, and stardust, nebulas. It just goes on and on and on. And when you really think about it, it really doesn't seem too impossible that humans don't know everything, and therefore, just like all these other things that are out there, we really don't know our own origins. So therefore, I'm going to leave you with this. I think that we should question everything, and we shouldn't be afraid to feel that we might be wrong about something just because we can't see it now. In the words of Carl Sagan, absence of evidence isn't evidence of abstinence, or not abstinence of evidence. But yeah, you get what I'm saying. Just because we don't have proof now doesn't mean that it's never existed, but at the same time, though, we shouldn't take it for granted either. Like, for example, just because people tell you something's true doesn't mean it's true, but at the same time, though, don't believe somebody just because they say something. So, like, look at all the religions people believe. Just because people say they believe in this doesn't mean it's true. Unless, of course, what they really are saying can actually be backed by evidence. And when you think about the things I told you, it makes sense. We came from space because we're made up of stars. And again, that's another good point to make, is that our bodies are made up of stardust. I don't remember how much percentage of it is, but I essentially would say that all of our body is it evolved from space, essentially. We came from the space, but then at the same time we've evolved on this planet. But it's still in the universe, therefore it came from space. But that's just how that works. So if you have any questions, let me know. If you have any other good points that you want to bring out, let me know. I'll comment below as soon as I possibly can. Thank you guys for listening, and I hope this just kind of changes the way you look at some things for a little bit.